Have you ever wondered why a woman can leave a marriage with the kids, the house, the car, and your income and still claim she was the one who sacrificed everything? Let's start there, not with theories, not with statistics, but with that moment, that quiet, nauseating moment when you're sitting alone in a barely furnished apartment, staring at a court document that calls you the non-custodial parent. You remember signing a marriage certificate in love. Now you're signing away weekends, rights, money, years, and maybe your sanity. You didn't think it would happen to you. That's what every man thinks. You thought you were different. You respected her. You provided. You didn't cheat. You stayed loyal. You thought marriage was a commitment, a team, a promise to build something together. But what you didn't understand, what no one told you, is that modern marriage isn't built on love. It's built on leverage. You see, marriage today isn't an emotional bond. It's a legal contract, and contracts don't care about your feelings. The moment you sign, you've agreed to a system that is designed to benefit her if things go wrong, and they often do. Not because you failed as a man, but because the system rewards exit, not endurance. She knows this even if she never says it out loud. Somewhere deep down, she knows that if she ever stops feeling fulfilled, she has the law, the culture, and public sympathy on her side. You, on the other hand, have principles, traditions, a dream you were sold as a boy. You believed love meant sacrifice. She was taught love means validation. This isn't about demonizing women. This is about seeing the structure, the incentives, the way modern marriage turns affection into obligation, and obligation into power. She can say, "I do and mean," as long as it benefits me. You say, "I do and mean," until death. That asymmetry will cost you everything if you don't wake up. Let's walk through it. At first, she's sweet, supportive. You feel lucky. She brags about how she'll always have your back, and for a while, maybe she does. But slowly, the expectations grow, the gratitude fades, your efforts become invisible. What was once thank you becomes, why didn't you? What was once teamwork becomes scoreboard. Who's doing more? Who's sacrificing more? She begins to keep tally not of kindness, but of leverage. The power shifts. She becomes the emotional gatekeeper. Your approval means less. Hers becomes everything. You start to seek it. You change small things to keep her calm, then bigger things to keep her happy. You tell yourself, "I'm just being a good husband." But what you're really doing is negotiating your worth. And every negotiation you lose costs you a piece of yourself. She doesn't need to raise her voice or throw things. She just needs to withdraw. A silent night, a cold shoulder, no eye contact at breakfast. That's all it takes. You bend. You apologize for things you didn't do. You agree to things you don't believe in. You become smaller, quieter, easier to live with. And that's the point, because the moment you adjust who you are to avoid her disapproval, you've lost the frame. Most men don't notice when it happens, because it doesn't come like a bomb. It comes like water, drip by drip. You stop hanging out with certain friends. You stop disagreeing on sensitive topics. You stop asking for sex. You think you're being mature, understanding, loving, but what you're really doing is deflating. And then, one day, she tells you she's not happy, and you freeze. You think it's something you can fix, so you double down. More gifts, more apologies, more quality time, but none of it works, because it was never about fixing, it was about control. She already made her decision. She just needed to feel like the victim before executing it. So she files, and suddenly you're in a courtroom where every narrative is already stacked against you. Your love doesn't matter, Your sacrifices don't matter. Only the paperwork does. She gets custody because children need their mother. You get visitation. She gets the house because stability. You get rent. She gets alimony because she paused her career. You get monthly reminders of your failure, direct from your bank account. And worst of all, your friends don't get it. Your family tells you to stay strong. Society tells you to respect her journey. No one asks how you feel sleeping alone in a place that doesn't smell like your kids anymore. No one sees you sitting in your car after drop-off, gripping the steering wheel because you can't cry in front of them. No one sees the nights you walk past your wedding photos, wondering how the hell you ended up here when all you wanted was to love someone honestly, and you still think it was your fault. But it wasn't your fault. That's the part you need to hear. You were set up to lose the moment you believed marriage was an equal commitment. It's not. Not anymore. Because in the modern world, it doesn't matter how loyal you are, how hard you work, or how much you sacrifice. What matters is what she feels. And the second those feelings shift, she has an escape hatch designed specifically for her, lined with legal protections, social support, and emotional absolution. She can walk away, head held high, with a dozen friends congratulating her for being brave. You walk away labeled as the man who couldn't make it work. If you speak up, you're bitter. If you stay silent, you're invisible. And if you try to rebuild, you're starting from scratch financially, emotionally, psychologically. The system doesn't punish her for leaving. It punishes you for staying too long. Why? Because men are expected to endure. That's what society conditions you for. From a young age, you're taught to take it on the chin. Don't complain, don't cry, don't crack. Provide, protect, be useful. Even in pain, be useful. She, on the other hand, is taught to express, to evaluate her needs, to prioritize fulfillment. You are trained to honor vows. She is trained to honor feelings. So when the two clash, guess who's expected to bend? You were never warned that the rules would change once the papers were signed. That the woman who once laughed at your jokes and kissed you in the kitchen would slowly become the arbiter of your worth. That your masculinity would be measured not by your integrity or courage, but by how well you could suppress yourself to keep her from leaving. You thought marriage would bring peace, but for many men, it becomes a slow erasure. You don't notice it at first because it's masked as compromise, but real compromise goes both ways. What you experience is submission dressed in empathy. She says she doesn't want to control you, but her tone changes when you say no. Her warmth cools when you stand your ground, and when you finally express your needs, she calls you selfish, dismissive, emotionally unavailable. You learn to keep your mouth shut. You learn to stop asking. You learn to shrink. And here's the kicker: she doesn't even need to intend it. It's not always malicious. It's instinct. Because once she has legal, emotional, and social power, the dynamics shift without her even realizing it. She no longer needs to negotiate. She just reacts. Disapproval becomes her currency. She learns, maybe subconsciously, that your guilt gets results. That your fear of losing her is stronger than her fear of losing you. That imbalance becomes the foundation of the relationship. And you keep trying to earn love in a game where the rules are invisible and always shifting. You become exhausted, not just physically, but spiritually. You stop feeling like a man. You don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the line, you stopped leading and started apologizing for existing. It shows in your eyes, in your posture, in how you talk to her, how you ask for permission before making plans, how you hold back your opinions to avoid the cold stare. You are still breathing, but you are no longer alive. And the worst part, she sees it. She senses your deflation. And instead of rekindling intimacy, it kills her attraction. Because women don't fall in love with men who beg. They fall in love with men who lead. And by the time you realize this, it's too late. You've already trained her to lose respect for you. So when she leaves, it's not a shock. It's a slow, final punctuation on a sentence you didn't even realize you were writing. And as you sit there with your signature on the divorce papers, you start to question everything. Was it ever real? Was she pretending? Did she love you? Or just the idea of what you could do for her? You may never get the answers, because the truth is, marriage doesn't require love. It requires compliance. And once you break that contract emotionally or otherwise, you become replaceable. That's the part no one wants to admit. That love in modern marriage is conditional. It's wrapped in performance, in legal framing, in social perception. And if you stop performing, you are discarded. So what do you do now? You don't try to go back. You don't try to prove your worth to someone who already decided it's not enough. You wake up, you stop chasing approval. You stop begging for peace. You stop hoping that sacrifice will earn you respect. Because the truth is brutal in a system designed like this. The more you give up for love, the less you're valued. At some point, you have to face it. The marriage wasn't about mutual growth. It was about her security, her comfort, her image. You were the scaffolding, the stable foundation she could stand on until she decided to redesign the building. And when she was done, you weren't part of the final architecture. You were excess material, disposable, outdated, in the way. The reason this hits so hard is because you didn't enter this thinking transactionally. You entered with your heart wide open. You thought that being a good man would be enough, that protecting her, providing for her, being emotionally available, those would earn you loyalty. You were wrong. Not because those things aren't valuable, but because in the eyes of the system, they are assumed, expected, taken for granted. You are judged not by how much you give, but by how well you maintain the illusion of her happiness. And that illusion is impossible to maintain. Why? Because it's not based on reality. It's based on emotion, on whims, on fantasy. You could be doing everything right and still be told you're failing because the metric isn't your effort, it's her feelings, and those are allowed to change, encouraged to change. In fact, the modern culture tells her that if she isn't changing, she's not evolving. That if she's unhappy, the answer is to leave, not to confront. So she doesn't confront. She exits, and you're left analyzing the wreckage, going through old texts, replaying arguments, wondering what moment was the turning point. But there was no single moment. There was only a shift in incentives. Once she realized she could leave without consequences and even be celebrated for it, the game was over. This is the part most men refuse to admit. She had options. She had backup. Whether emotionally or financially or socially, there was a safety net. Divorce isn't a terrifying cliff for her. It's a runway. She'll land somewhere, friends, family, a new man, a therapist reinforcing that she deserves more. Meanwhile, your safety net is a rope made of your own resilience, your ability to shut up, grind harder, and pretend you're fine. And deep down, you hate yourself for not seeing it coming. You wonder how you became so blind. But it's not blindness, it's programming. You were conditioned to be useful, to believe that your value comes from service, from sacrifice, from putting others before yourself. You were taught that love means giving, but what you weren't taught is that in today's world, the more you give, the more invisible you become. Because modern love, especially in marriage, often functions like a loan. You give everything up front, your time, your energy, your commitment, and hope that one day you'll be repaid with loyalty. But there's no guarantee, no interest rate, no protection. And if she defaults, you lose everything, and no one punishes her. In fact, they'll probably tell her she was brave for leaving a situation that no longer served her. This is the phrase that will haunt you. It no longer served me. That's how marriage ends today, not in betrayal, not in scandal, but in reframing. You become a service that expired, a product past its usefulness. And she walks away with a clean conscience because society told her she was entitled to more. You can't fix this by being nicer. You can't prevent this by being more romantic, more available, more understanding. You can't negotiate your way into permanence. The moment the system gives her the power to walk away without risk, you have already lost the foundation of trust. You're not her partner, you're her contingency plan. So what now? Now, you face yourself, strip everything away, the expectations, the guilt, the fantasy. And what's left? A man, raw, alone, not broken, but cracked open. And that's where real power begins, not in chasing love, not in proving your worth, but in reclaiming your standards, in saying, never again will I confuse a contract for devotion. Never again will I trade my freedom for conditional affection. You stop asking why she left. You start asking why you stayed. You stayed because you were afraid of starting over, because you believed that sacrifice was noble, because you thought love meant pain. And now you understand that pain without growth is slavery, that devotion without boundaries is self-destruction. And here's the truth you've been avoiding. She didn't want the real you. She wanted the version of you that would shape himself around her moods, her goals, her vision of happiness. And the moment you asked for something in return, the moment you stopped performing, you became the problem. You weren't too much. You were too aware. And that awareness is what sets you free now. So now you know. You see the trap for what it is. And it's not just yours, it's systemic. It's built into how men are raised, how love is sold, how responsibility is weaponized. You are taught to internalize failure when things collapse, even though the game was never fair to begin with. And here's where the emotional cost really kicks in. It's not just the money, it's not just the custody, it's what happens to your identity. You start to question your instincts, your judgment. You think, if I was smart, how did I let this happen? You start to doubt your strength, your value, your ability to trust. And that's the most dangerous part, because a man who loses trust in himself is a man who becomes easy to manipulate again. You weren't weak, you were loyal. There's a difference. But loyalty without discernment is just self-betrayal. And the people who benefit from that, they'll never stop taking. They don't need to physically overpower you. They just need to convince you that being a man means sacrificing yourself for peace that never comes. You can't unlive the betrayal, but you can choose what it means going forward. You can either let it break you into smaller pieces, or you can let it forge you into something cleaner, colder, sharper. This doesn't mean becoming bitter. It means becoming aware, not just of women, but of yourself, your tendencies, your patterns, your blind spots. Ask yourself, why did you stay silent when your boundaries were crossed? Why did you tolerate coldness, withholding, mockery? Why did you assume that her unhappiness was always your fault? Because somewhere deep down, you believed love was a reward for performance. You believed that if you worked hard enough, proved yourself enough, stayed patient enough, you'd earn happiness. That was the lie. That's what kept you trapped. Real love, if it exists at all, does not demand that you shrink. It does not come with ultimatums, tests, or shifting rules. And it sure as hell doesn't show up in a courtroom asking for half your income. So what's the move now? It's not to swear off women. It's not to scream at the world. It's to rebuild something inside you that no one can leverage again. Detachment, the kind of calm, ruthless clarity that doesn't flinch when love walks in or when it walks out. You no longer believe the stories. You no longer chase potential. You no longer entertain affection that comes with terms and conditions. You see relationships now for what they are, not sacred covenants, but voluntary exchanges. And if the exchange becomes exploitative, you walk. You don't explain. You don't plead. You don't negotiate with someone who sees your presence as replaceable. This is the shift. When you stop seeking validation and start enforcing values. When you stop performing and start observing, you watch, you measure, you test, not to manipulate, but to verify. Is she here for you or for what you can provide? Does she bring peace or does she demand control? Is her love rooted in reality or in what you represent? You don't rush in anymore. You let her reveal herself, slowly, fully. You understand now that the moment she feels too safe to lose you, she feels free to stop earning you. And it's not just romantic. This shift changes how you operate in every area of life. You stop over-explaining. You stop chasing approval from people who never earned your trust. You start saying no, firmly, without guilt. You stop being the emotional mule for everyone around you. You become harder to access. And that's not cruelty, that's value, because anything easy to get is easy to discard, and you are no longer discardable. The pain didn't end you, it woke you up, and that's what she didn't expect. She expected you to spiral, to beg, to crumble, but instead, you stood in the wreckage, picked up your name, and said, "This ends with me." Not just the divorce, not just the relationship, the entire cycle, the cycle of proving, pleasing, apologizing for your masculinity, that dies now. Because you've seen the system, you've walked through the fire, and you came out not just burned but branded with truth. The man you are now, he doesn't fall for tears without accountability. He doesn't get manipulated by silence. He doesn't get baited by shame. He doesn't confuse submission with peace. He doesn't hand over power in exchange for attention. He watches, he waits, he decides. And now, you're no longer just a man recovering from betrayal. You're a man who sees. You see how the promises of marriage were never made for your protection. You see how the legal system doesn't care about fairness. It cares about predictability, enforceability, and appearances. You see how society has quietly accepted the idea that a man's pain is the price of a woman's freedom. You see how you were never supposed to win, only endure. But that changes now, because the moment you stop playing a rigged game, you start to regain your freedom. And with freedom comes responsibility, not to her, not to society, but to yourself. To be vigilant, to hold the line, to never again let yourself be seduced by a smile that comes with a contract. You learn to listen not just to her words, but to your own reactions. When something feels off, you don't dismiss it. When you sense manipulation, you don't rationalize it. When your voice starts to disappear inside a relationship, you don't wait for permission to speak. You leave. This is what emotional self-respect looks like. It's not loud, it's not performative, it's not angry, it's quiet, controlled, steady. You don't need to threaten, shout, or explain yourself anymore. You just choose who stays in your life based on what they show, not what they promise. And yes, that means fewer people will stay. Fewer women will pass the filter. Good. Because once you've rebuilt yourself from scratch, you realize how high the cost of self-betrayal really was. You remember what it felt like to live in a home where your opinions weren't welcome. You remember waking up next to someone who made you feel like a guest in your own life. You remember shrinking just to keep the peace, and how that peace was never real. Never again. You no longer chase warmth that comes with conditions. You no longer confuse obedience with love. You no longer believe that loyalty means tolerating disrespect. And you stop playing hero in someone else's story. You are not here to save her from her boredom, her childhood wounds, or her need for emotional validation. You are not here to be reshaped by her moods. You are not here to be broken down, rebuilt, and rebranded as her perfect little project. You are here to live, with standards, with boundaries, with presence, with purpose. And if someone wants to share that life with you, they earn it. Not with beauty, not with sex, not with charm, but with consistency, with integrity, with respect that doesn't disappear when she's angry, with love that doesn't vanish when you say no. You now understand what few men are ever taught, that real power isn't in how much you give. It's in how well you protect what's yours, especially your time, your energy, your identity. You don't have to hate her. You don't have to seek revenge. You just have to remember who you were before you tried to earn love in a game where the rules kept changing. And then you walk away, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity, because the man you are now, he doesn't cling, he doesn't beg, he doesn't lose sleep wondering if he was enough. He knows the truth. She didn't break you. She revealed what you were too afraid to protect.